People are lucky to have you doing this because obviously a lot of people are being very, very quiet.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, 100%. You're putting yourself in like the
in
line
harm's way. Yeah,
yeah,
like literally, it's a thankless job.
Yeah. Some of these landlords should give you a building.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want one.
True.
Hey,
I don't know.
All right, we're here at the Real Estate Roundtable with IPRG, and we have a guest today, Kenny Burgos from the New York Apartment Association. Welcome, Kenny.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, happy to have you here. I'm joined with Donal Flaherty and Luke Sproviero here at IPRG. This is Derek Bestrick. All right, Kenny, it's been a whirlwind of a start to the new year here, right? With the new mayoral administration, the governor had the State of the State address this week. Obviously, we're following the Pinnacle bankruptcy case. It's just been a lot to kind of wrap our heads around, and we wanted to bring you in and kind of round the bases here on what's going on in the market.
Yeah, I mean, no question, people have called me. They've been concerned. There's been a really quick 13, 14 days now with the new mayoral admin in. The governor has given her State of the State and really, hasn't addressed much in the rent-stabilized industry and everything that we know that's happening. I think there's really been a disconnect on, what we're seeing on the ground and maybe what, state and city are really acknowledging.
So I think a good place to start would maybe be just a little bit of background on yourself.
Sure.
And then we can talk about what New York Apartment Association is all about right now.
Yeah, super quick background. Born and bred New Yorker, grew up in the Bronx. Ran for office in 2020 after working in city council for several years. Was elected, resigned just a little bit over last year to lead this organization, which is the New York Apartment Association, a merger of two long-standing rent stabilization associations. Most will know, RSA and CHIP. We merged forces because of what happened in the past 2 years. This industry has just been completely, on its back foot right now for several years. And so coming together as one industry, one voice, trying to change our approach and how we engage with the legislature, with the city, with the public, educate folks is really what it's been a big part of my goal in this organization. And we now stand, if I'm not mistaken, as the largest multifamily trade association, certainly in New York, and if not in the country.
Yeah. Why did you decide to get involved with this organization and apartment multifamily advocacy?
Yeah, so when I was a state assemblyman, I was approached by Jay Martin, back when he led CHIP. He's now with us, thankfully, and he educated me on what was happening in the rent stabilized industry. And I think, like many New Yorkers, I knew the term rent stabilization. I knew what a rent stabilized apartment was, or I thought I did, but that was about the end of my education, right? You sort of knew that it was probably a cheaper apartment and you could stay there for many years. Most don't know the inner workings of it. And when I learned the law that I passed the year before I was elected and how detrimental it was to this housing stock, it was clear to me we had to do something. And at this time, I mean, I'm still a Democrat. I was a Democrat, and I was really frustrated nationally with what I viewed as Democrats not really tackling issues head on and sort of just dancing around the edges, and housing being such a core issue in New York City, and to me impacts everything from community health, mental health, to economic vitality, to crime, you name it. It all comes down to housing. We all have to live somewhere, right? And if that's not stable, then nothing else will be. So I knew it would be controversial given the politics to try and fix what was happening, and I was right and met with a lot of resistance when I introduced the bill and trying to bring back vacancy reset, which is really the core component that keeps rent stabilization alive.
For sure.
We weren't successful in the time when I pushed for that bill. We landed on a change to IAIs, which I would say, and many will say probably has had an incremental improvement in the industry, but since then, they approached me and said, hey, listen, this fight continues on. Would you like to lead this organization? At the time, I had just had my son, brand new baby. You have to consider that on a personal level. You want to keep traveling back and forth to Albany. And this is a fight I believe in. This is something that I feel is very important. So I thought, what better way to use my time, to use my skill set, to use what I know and hopefully what I can do in this capacity.
We appreciate you doing this.
Yeah.
It means a lot to all of us. It's such important work, and we feel like our voices just really are not heard. I feel like it's just like people just don't want to listen to our perspective. So we really appreciate you taking this on. Not sure how often you hear that, but
not a very not an often time I get to thank you for this work.
Thankless,
usually look at my comments, it's a bit on the other side, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So in terms of the New York Apartment Association, maybe you touched on this already, but like, what are we trying to accomplish at this point? Like, what's the goal of New York Apartment Association or landlords in general?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it 30,000 feet up, right? You know, what I've told a lot of my members is that the real estate industry has been painted as the boogeyman. You know, I mean, this has been a political playbook before I was even born, but really hasn't painted as a boogeyman and done well, I would say, in the past 10 to 15 years. And part of that problem has been this inability to connect with a lot of new members. You know, again, I came in 2020 with the largest class of the state legislature since 1972. We've had a huge changeover in many of our lawmakers. You know, I started in government back in 2015, and that was probably the tail end of when you had a lot of professionals, so to speak, meaning folks who were lawyers full-time or accountants or even real estate operators, and then were lawmakers sort of part-time. That was really the model. We've now moved into an era of politics in America and in New York where you have a lot more former staffers, you have activists, you have tenant attorneys. So there's been a real changeover, and the real estate industry has not done a good job in educating and connecting with these elected officials on their impact, on their partnership, on their ability to help with good policy, and what they try to do and what they do in communities. And because of that, because they've been either silent or try to hide in the shadows, the narrative has been shaped. And that has had real strong effects, right? I mean, you can take public polls right now, and the sentiment of lawmakers is usually the sentiment of most New Yorkers, given we're a largely renter town.
Yeah.
Most people would just believe landlords are inherently just bad people, greedy, and then they operate with just pure malice, right? And that's just not the case, and we know that. You know, and it's not to say there's no bad operators out there. There's bad operators in every industry. But anyway, so my goal here is to re-engage with all the new lawmakers that have come in, educate them on what it means to operate housing, and specifically rent-stabilized housing. You know, you have people that have this belief that once a building is paid off, that the rent is just pure profit in your pocket, that there's just no payment to run housing. Like it's education gaps like that create policy that we see today that's so disconnected from the reality that we know. And that's what I strive to do, and I do it. Social media is a big part of it. Most people receive their news and are just on their phone more than anything today. So I make TikTok videos. I'm going to film 4 of them today, and that's a piece of it, right? But we have an internal lobbying team, an external lobbying team that speak with the city members, their staff, the state members, and their staff. We speak with the governor. So we're really trying to attack it from all fronts. I have people on my team. We're talking to reporters every single day. We're trying to get news stories written. We're giving our quotes. We're giving perspective. We're really just putting ourselves out there, because I know in my heart that we can get to a world where this isn't a zero-sum game, right? This doesn't have to be the loss of tenants to somehow benefit the real estate industry. You can protect tenants. You can have an abundance of housing. You can have brokers and deal makers working in this industry all doing well, and it doesn't have to come at the cost of everyday New Yorkers.
Yeah. I feel like some of the lawmakers aren't really willing to hear what you have to say, though. I mean, I saw some press conferences over the last 2 weeks where they're basically saying that landlords haven't opened up the books. They don't understand how these buildings operate. They think the landlords are making, money hand over fist. Meanwhile, there's been thousands of offering memorandums circulated throughout the years, and
I'm pretty sure this new foreclosure definitely opened up the books, right?
I don't even know if they consider.
I just feel like they ignore it just so they push their agenda forward.
Yeah,
they're like, for your vacancy reset bill. What was the pushback? What was their excuse for not even talking about it?
Oh, I mean, you just start getting misinformation pushed out there, right? So you get a lot of activists who aren't even elected officials, but garner a lot of attention and influence.
Yep.
And they were saying, this bill is going to raise rent on grandma. You're trying to evict people, excuse me, little things like that, and people just get this knee-jerk reaction, say, "Whoa, evictions, increased rent. I don't even want to get near this bill," right? After that, they've closed their ears and they don't even want to engage anymore when it's just the first thing from the truth.
They don't even look at the numbers. They just push their agenda.
They're hitting on the debt a lot. They're hitting on the fact that these people refinance. They take on large debt. They take money out, and they could
buy more buildings.
They could easily make a lot of money if they weren't servicing the debt. Who took the debt? Not us. So I think it's a lot of that. It's kind of true, right? There is some debt. That's the one thing that you got to give, but that. Either way, I mean.
But even on the debt, I mean, listen, I don't operate housing. I didn't. I learned a lot about this even in this role. But I knew for a fact you have to finance these buildings if you want to constantly improve them, right?
You have to.
Pre-1974 buildings are very, very old. You can't just assume the building. I mean, they're built well back then, but they're not built so well that you can just never reinvest a dollar.
Yeah.
So it feels like it feels like we've had like the losses just racking up against landlords, and it just seems like it's one thing after another. I've seen the whole DSA playbook for how to decommoditize housing, and it seems like they're really close to just completely executing the playbook. We can go through that a little more later. But like in terms of successes, have we had any successes since 2019? And like, if so, like what are the successes that we can kind of hang our hat on so far?
Yeah, and politics, success is maybe not like success other folks would recognize it, right? It's not like if you cut a deal and say, hey, this is a great deal, we bought the building, everyone made out. Well, that's not what success can sometimes look like in politics. Sure, a passage of a law that you're trying to push for, it's a huge success. But there's so many more incremental successes you can have along the way, and I feel we've made many of them. I mean, again, just the acknowledgement. It may not sound like much, but when I was introducing this bill a few years ago, people thought I was trying to scream the sky is falling and thought this was just a load of BS, right? There's now been an acknowledgement amongst the political class, like there is a problem here, right? Whether they want to acknowledge it publicly, that's one thing, but privately, people have told me, okay, this is an issue. I'm seeing what you're talking about happen in my community, right? So that's huge right there. You're having this changeover where now people are engaging with us. Like I said before, the real estate industry was the boogeyman. There were lawmakers who would not take your call. There were lawmakers that wouldn't give you a meeting. I'm proud to say today, I don't think there's a single lawmaker that I would have difficulty getting a meeting with. Now, changing their mind is a whole different conversation, but they're willing to engage with us. These are smaller steps, and we'd like to move faster, but we all know the slow wheels of government, and that does stretch beyond into the politics of it as well. And there's been other small successes, ones that I probably would bore your listeners, but these have just been small successes within bills. When we lobby, it's hard for you to see, I guess, sort of what we've been able to accomplish, because when bills come out, that's the final product, and it's not polite, I guess, to come out and say, yeah, well, the bill came out that way because we were influential in this language on this line item, right? But I'll just basically say it could have been a lot worse in the past few months.
We get that, 100%. We get that.
And I think a lot of other people are on Twitter, on X, like a lot of people, there's a lot of eyes to this now. Like you see people tweeting in like Elon or Ackman, like they're because of our new mayor and
Cea
all
Weaver
the people
stuff.
and the Cea Weaver stuff, that's getting a lot of national attention now. So I hope that helps like our cause a little bit and gets it out there.
100%. Mayor Mamdani has been both a gift and a curse, right? Because the gift, in my eyes, is that he has made this his number one campaign promise, being the rent freeze, and has put so much attention on the rent stabilized housing stock. And we all know the numbers, we all know the reality, and that's why I'm so confident. Like I said, I would talk to anyone. I would talk to any media outlet, right wing, left wing, center, whatever you want, because I'm so confident in the data and what's happening here and what we've seen happen in the past few years. So the benefit has been, because he was elected, because him and I were elected together in 2020, we're both young guys, we're both sort of on the opposite sides of the coin on this issue. It's made for a good media narrative in many cases. And I have no issue talking about it because I know, this industry's in trouble.
Speaking of Mamdani, he's all about the affordability agenda, which I think everyone stands behind. Cost of living is so high. But I just want to know why that's so heavily directed towards these rent stabilized tenants in apartments where their rents already are affordable. Like in the Pinnacle portfolio, I think the average rent is $1,000 or less per month. So I just am confused why that is such a major part of the affordability agenda.
Yeah. Two things on this, right? So what I'll say first is, if you take a look at the Mamdani primary election heat map and see where a lot of his support came from, and you overlay that with a lot of the new development that's happened in New York City, it's very interesting to see how they almost like are a perfect match. And what that tells me is that a lot of activists today and a lot of the, I guess we'll say the median Mamdani voters, view housing, landlords, and even rent stabilization through the lens of new development. And we all know new developments, 421A, 485X, those are also rent stabilized apartments. Now, obviously, a completely different world from pre-74, which I typically advocate for, but their perception of what's happening in the housing industry is still very localized, right? If you're living in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, and you only know rents that are $4,500, and including the new rent stabilized apartments, or even the free market units that are in a mixed regulated building, it's just a very, very complicated landscape. And to the layperson, like, they don't know as much as we know because this is not their work. And so their viewpoint of landlords and rent stabilization is the rent's too damn high and the landlord's just being greedy. They're not familiar or just choose to not be aware of the average $1,200 rents happening in the outer boroughs, right? You look at Pinnacle and their properties, or you look at some other properties that are failing in the West Bronx and Upper Manhattan. That's not where Mamdani performed extremely well. He got his votes there, but his highest performance was in those pockets of Brooklyn, those pockets of Queens. So there's a disconnect right there in these conversations, and that's why I say the education has to happen.
It's a major disconnect, though.
Major. I mean, it's huge.
Are they unaware of the 50 to 60,000 apartments that are like vacant and falling apart that no one's living in?
Well, like I said, right, this has been
They
sort of
don't
that
wanna live
success.
there.
Previously, it didn't exist. We were accused of showing apartments that were in
Yeah.
Jersey. Now there's
Oh
been an
my
acknowledgement,
God.
like, okay, no, there are vacancies. Then they'll say, well, there's not that many. Which is it? Right?
Yeah.
They don't exist, but then then some of them propose we should put a vacancy tax on them to force them online.
Yeah.
But then it's not that much. Like, they just continue to change the argument.
It's crazy. It's crazy to think that you don't need to put money into these buildings. I mean, they fall apart all the time. These are very, very old buildings. The apartments are in horrible shape.
Well,
I just don't understand where they think the money's
I
going
think-
to come from.
I think the new administration would agree with you that they need to put money into these buildings, and it seems to me that seems to be the direction that they're really going with this office to protect tenants. And I think they're very focused on building condition and HPD violations. So that's that's definitely something that's pretty concerning to me when I think these buildings are operating barely getting by, and now all of a sudden they're basically, I mean, in these lawsuits or these objections to the lawsuits from the Attorney General in the
Has the
city.
administration like tried to like point light, and this might be a bad idea. You don't want to obviously like anger them, but to point light on what they're doing, like NYCHA, for example, right? Like, if you guys are so good, it's so easy to run buildings. Like, why are the NYCHA buildings falling apart and people are freezing because the boilers break? Or why are these people that you say are going to be your partner in buying these buildings, these non-for-profits, why are their current buildings littered with violations and falling apart? Like, no one really like the obvious stuff.
And they know exactly how much these buildings cost to run because they have those.
Yeah, and they're like, I think NYCHA's like one of the worst landlords like in New York.
It's undoubtedly the
So
worst
how is
landlord.
how is this not like you just don't, no one wants to pick a fight? Or
I mean, people do point this out. I've
Yeah.
pointed this out in commentary, and others have for sure. I think in the case of NYCHA, it's just been such a prolonged issue of disrepair and disinvestment. People have sort of just, know that's just the reality, right? And it's almost not, it's not news,
Yeah.
excuse me, in some ways. Now, the point still stands, right? Like, New York City still manages 174,000 apartments in NYCHA. Granted, it's federally funded, but it is the responsibility of New York City, and by extension, mayors are the landlords of these properties. But there's always going to be either excuses or differentiations made that the federal government didn't invest in this, and that's why it's been years of disrepair. But again, we know the reality is these are math problems. Housing has to function through math, and if we want affordability, if we want rents to be lower, Mayor Mamdani has acknowledged this in building, right? He's acknowledged the cost of building housing. One of the biggest costs is waiting, right? And he's doing the right thing and trying to remove some of those barriers to build housing and reduce the cost to build, because the wood and cement doesn't care who you're building it for. The cost, the cost. But that same mindset hasn't been brought over to the operation of housing, and that's what we're trying to bring it to.
yeah, it's just that they act like it's not. It's a for-profit. It has to be for-profit. People aren't doing it for no reason. I mean, even their partners in the wherever it is in the Bronx or wherever they're doing this, these people that they're bringing in, these are all for-profit people. They wouldn't be investing in building these properties if it wasn't making them money. And they have violations on their buildings too. All these affordable housing associations that are doing this.
Yeah, but 100%. But like I was saying earlier, right? Like, even people who live in those buildings are typically unaware of the structure. They're typically unaware of who their owner is. Is it a nonprofit? Has HPD given a low-cost loan to this building? Right? They're just not aware of these really small details. So to them, everyone's a landlord, so they're not seeing differentiations.
Yeah.
Got it.
So what was the point of Mamdani going straight to 85 Clarkson the day that he gave his inauguration speech and announcing the office to protect tenants? What was the point of that whole, like, going into the building, showing the level of disrepair, the bankruptcy proceeding that they decided they'd all of a sudden get involved in? What's going on there?
Well, I mean, it ties right into his campaign from day one, right? His campaign against been centered around a rent freeze. It has been targeted towards renters. And listen, again, when you poll this stuff, it polls extremely high, right?
Okay.
If you ask people, what do you think about a rent freeze? What do you think about, President Trump is pushing for credit card cap fees, right? I think this is sort of that horseshoe theory where economic populism meets on both sides, right? We know both those policies aren't really going to work out very well, but it polls really well. And for politicians, if it polls well, that means vote. That means I get support. That means I don't get blowback. But to me, the reason why he would do it day one of the inauguration is because he needs a story arc going into the June RGB, right? The data is not going to prove that a rent freeze is warranted, right? They'll try and frame it as many ways as they want. But objectively, this data is going to show that these buildings are struggling, that the stress is high, that the NOI is decreasing, right? But so because that's going to happen, he needs to build a public story arc that shows since day one, I've been highlighting slumlords. Since day one, I've been highlighting the distress, or I've been highlighting, the conditions renters have been in, and that's why I say there's a rent freeze. That's why he's come out with the renter ripoff hearings, right?
Yeah.
None of these are policy based. None of these are based in fact or bringing together, the office of mayor, the mayor's office of budget, the finance department, and saying, let's really have this conversation in 6 months why we have a rent freeze. No, he's putting stories out there. He's making videos. He's getting media hits. That's the game.
For sure. So what is the whole rental ripoff hearings all about? What are they trying to accomplish with that?
So details aren't exactly out yet, but
What do you think?
But what they've put out is, get your stories ready. We want to hear from you. Again, to me, this sounds very much like the RGB hearings that go borough to borough and allow tenants an opportunity to talk about why they think rents either should or shouldn't go up. I think it'll be the same thing. I think it'll be even more theatrical.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
The guy is good, right? He's very good on not just social media, but just overall just
excellent.
communications.
Yeah, he's
right?
very good.
They're all very good.
Yeah. So when you tie that skill set and now take in millions of disgruntled tenants who are unfortunately the subject of bad housing policy, they're going to put that on full display. And it will be internalized as, wow, landlords are really bad in New York City, instead of saying, hey, wow, housing policy is so bad in New York City that these are the realities.
Yeah, he wants a viral click. That's all he shoots for.
If you took a 70-unit building in Brooklyn that had let's say 20 vacancies, people were just or 10 vacancies, people were just holding them vacant, and said, okay, you get a vacancy reset, but we'll grant you a vacancy reset, but you got to fix all the other units and the violations in the building, clean up the building, and you can get your market rents on those units. Everyone would win. The people with the low rents that had the leaky faucets, they would win.
How do we counter
It's
this
just
narrative?
insane.
When the Real Deal wrote an article about this, they called it a show trial. They also compared it to events that happened in like communist countries where basically to get their narrative across, but it's not the full story, right? It's all theatrics, it's all one-sided. You're going to get the worst stories possible, but what about the stories of tenants not being good tenants, staying and not paying rent for years, damaging buildings?
That's their thing.
The question is, how do we get a different perspective out there to counter this rental ripoff hearing, which is obviously going to be a big thing and it's happening soon?
Well, I think mediums like this, right? Podcasts, again, like I said, social media, going on news channels. I would say the New York press, that's again one of those wins, right? If you look at press stories from 3 years ago, the press is still a New York City voter, right? A lot of the press today is still
New York Post is throwing some stuff out.
But beyond the Post, we have been successful in, if you look at stories from 3 years ago, there's a different coverage on these issues than today because the press cannot ignore what we brought to their faces. So to push back on narratives, it's like that. It's like going to where the sources are. We're the press. Putting out your own mediums and putting out your own data. You have to try and put that information out for public opinion. That's the game. Now, obviously, being a mayor and having the the tools of City Hall, you have a lot more influence and a lot more reach. But it doesn't mean the fight shouldn't go on.
And he's so good at the social media and just getting attention.
Probably one of the best communicators ever generated.
Him and Trump are so similar in that way. Just very good at getting attention. 100%. Yes. He's phenomenal.
But what do you think good landlords can do? Like the landlords that are following all the rules, they don't have any violations on the buildings, they have big portfolios, they do everything right. What can they do to change this image of just slumlords across the board?
Starts from the bottom. So I always encourage a lot of my owners. A lot of owners are hesitant to be on the news, be public, even if they have a zero violation building, right? Because unfortunately, that usually leads to some sort of attack or some sort of targeting from tenant advocate groups or whoever may have a bone to pick with them. But what I tell some of my owners is that if you have relationships, or we can help relationships on the most local level with lawmakers, show them, right? This doesn't have to be a news crew there. You don't need cameras out. Just say, hey, Senator X, Y, and Z, or Assemblyman, or a city council member, I'd love to take a tour of my building so you can see my operation. I've done this. I've had a building for 40 years. My family's had it, and we've housed people. It's affordable rents, high quality buildings, right? Because, what I've told lawmakers is that it cannot be the case that someone who owns a building in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, that has no violations. The tenants are pretty happy there. It's a nice building operating well, and then that person also operates a building in the West Bronx where the expenses have gone through the roof and are just not and the rents aren't covering those expenses. It cannot be the case that owner is a slumlord in the Bronx and a good operator in Brooklyn.
That's a good point.
That is the cause of housing policy. right? He doesn't choose to say, I'm going to just run my building to the ground in the Bronx because somehow that makes me a profit and run the Brooklyn building better. It's just not the case.
Absolutely true.
100%. I'd like to talk about this office to protect tenants because it seemed like that was part of the de Blasio administration, and under Eric Adams it seems like it wasn't as much of a thing, but that was the first announcement that Mamdani made as soon as he became mayor. He announced Cea Weaver, Office to Protect Tenants, and it seems like she's been pretty anti-landlord over the years. So we just wanted to understand kind of what we have in store with that.
Yeah. I mean, anyone that's been in New York State government and has even engaged in housing in the smallest bit has known Cea Weaver. She's been a fixture of this. She's led the tenant movement for a number of years, as long as I've been in politics. And it is, without a doubt, there's no question that she is the architect of the 2019 rent laws.
100%.
I mean, she is the absolute architect. And there's now lots of footage coming to resurface to show, like, not just how much she had her hand in this, but also what was the real gameplay here. And there's been other videos showing Mayor Mamdani who says, I take most of my housing information from Cea Weaver. So
we saw that.
There's real concern here. I mean, Cea Weaver has made her plans very clear. She is trying to decommodify this housing. She has been successful so far in devaluing this housing. And my hope is, first and foremost, that many of the lawmakers, I think, that voted for the 2019 rent laws, some are not there anymore, some still are, didn't vote with the intention of decommodifying this housing. They voted with the intention of protecting tenants. That's what this bill was praised as. It was praised as the most sweeping tenant protection in the nation, even though most of it had to do with actual financing of the building, but that's another conversation, right? And so having her in the office to protect tenants, along with Mayor Mamdani, and they have been consistent in their goals to seemingly defund these buildings, bankrupt them, intervene in bankruptcy cases, is worrying. I mean, I won't sugarcoat this, right? She is a skilled operator. She commands thousands of tenants, who parrot every single talking point that she has, and using that with the power of City Hall, with the power of a mayor who is fully committed to her, because in light of all these, new videos and clips and comments she's made, he stood by her, right?
Yeah.
Whereas his appointment secretary, she had one comment come out, and within 24 hours she was forced to resign from office. But Cea Weaver, he will not back down from her. So time is going to tell, what this true partnership means. I
have here the outline of the DSA's playbook to decommodify the housing. And I mean, there's a lot of pretty concerning stuff in here. I mean, tenant unions organizing to do rent strikes. It says implement strict and expand strict rent control, which we already have through HSTPA. They got good cause eviction through as well, so we basically have rent control everywhere.
Yep.
It says enforce housing code violations aggressively. Use tenant unions to report and amplify violations, creating a cycle of fines and penalties. It says low rents make compliance impossible, leading to deferred maintenance and building deterioration. Mandate costly repairs and escalate burdens. So require extensive fixes for violations with no rent increases to recoup cost. This compounds the strain for low revenue and fines. Tenants demand repairs while withholding rent, pushing buildings towards insolvency. Next is drive buildings to bankruptcy. Check, did that. Combine low rents, fines, repairs, demands, inability to refinance or sell at value leads to defaults, foreclosure, and bankruptcy. Turn private assets into opportunities for public intervention. Landlords will abandon or sell distressed properties. Force cheap sales and block private buyers. So distressed owners sell at discounts due to devalued assets and legal issues, and then insert the city and state buyers and transition to collective ownership. So city authorities seize or buy properties in distress, converting them to social housing, and obviously we've already seen these COPA, which who knows if that'll come to pass or not.
The thing here is the tenants that are on her side, the biggest losers here are obviously the landlords and the tenants, because the tenants aren't getting anything better. They're basically, all Cea Weaver is doing is devaluing the real estate so they can come in and try to buy it. The tenants are just going to end up with one crappy landlord, then they're going to get the worst landlord, the city, the government. And there's no win-win for there. It's a lose.
I don't think they care about
but
the
they don't
tenants
pay rent.
or affordability.
No, but the tenants are the ones that are backing them. The reason why
I think
the mayors...
I think they're pawns in a bigger
I know, but that's
type of
they don't realize
crazy-
they're pawns. They
crazy
need to realize they're
game
pawns.
Yeah, and what really concerns me is everything I've seen at her press conferences, every single thing she talks about is building condition, violations. I think I saw something when she was announced, saying that buildings need to go through a comprehensive building-wide condition report. I mean, 85 Clarkson, I forget how many units that is, but I'm sure it's a huge
It's a big building. It's
I'm
not
sure
huge, it's big.
I'm sure it's in major disrepair.
Yep.
If you had a building-wide condition report done for that building, the cost would be in the millions in terms of what the building needs for repair. So, you know, if she's going to enforce housing code violations aggressively, and you know, even these objections to this Pinnacle bankruptcy with the Office of the Attorney General now getting involved and the city getting involved, they keep talking about improved tenants' living conditions, being able to maintain the building. So there's some scenarios that play out in my head where I'm very concerned at the direction this is going.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the point that you said earlier was these tenants are a pawn in this and maybe don't even realize what's happening, right? We've seen this in the case in 1520 Sedgwick Avenue. This is a building run by a nonprofit for the past 10 years. Mayor Mamdani made his announcement there and cited that building as sort of the model of nonprofit-run housing. It wasn't until the news went there and they interviewed some of these tenants, and it's on camera, and the tenants were literally saying, I've had a stove for 6 years. I have roaches and rats. The previous owner was better, right? I mean, this is a clear example of like private-run housing runs better than nonprofit housing in most cases, has lower violation counts. But that story is not out there as much as it should be. Tenants don't understand that as nearly as much as they should, because, you know, I can tell you this as a former lawmaker, like the saying always goes, people vote with their pockets, right? People care simply about their household, what it means for them. If it's going to cost them $1, their ears are pretty much turned off.
Do you think that's a good counter, like interviewing, like putting media out there from our side, from landlords, real estate professionals of these tenants in nonprofit buildings that are saying that? Because I've never seen that. I haven't seen that clip. And I feel like that's powerful. I didn't see it, but...
Well, this is also a problem with algorithms, right? I mean, we do this stuff. I certainly follow a lot of creators that are now doing this, and the number seems to be growing. And what I'm thankful for, I'm seeing a lot more present these issues in an objective sort of, you know, fact pattern, as opposed to trying, you know, rival up or get people all riled up on the left or on the right. But we know that's what the algorithm rewards, right? So we all also are living in our own algorithm bubbles, right?
Yeah.
I can't assume the social media posts that I put out are really landing in DSA pages until I know when it lands there, because when I start getting a litany of attacks, I said, okay, they've shared my post in their group chats and now they're coming, but it's not landing there organically.
Yeah.
So we have to continue to push this stuff out there, but the nature of the algorithm is only going to, you know, let it land on so many eyes.
Why do they want the city to take over housing? Why do they want all this community housing?
Their model and their vision is, and they've always said this, is Vienna, Austria. Socialists have been absolutely infatuated with the Vienna, Austria model, because, you know, socialists ran Austria during the period of Red Vienna and had this social housing, and rent is relatively affordable compared to the average Viennese, I think, right? Viennese resident income. But there's so many. There's so much there to unpack, and we can't do it all today. But it's comparing apples to oranges. So much so that I actually went to Vienna 2 months ago.
This is all, I've never even heard of this.
We haven't put too much of this out yet, but we went to Vienna to basically preempt this argument that they're going to make here. And what I'll simply say is this. Vienna somewhat works, and there's still lots of flaws there, but because in America, in New York specifically, housing funds the government. Right, housing funds the government through property taxes, through mortgage recording tax, a host of fines and a host of fees that are associated with running housing. Vienna, the government funds housing. It's completely flipped on its head, right? They impose this 1% tax on income to then provide some of the social housing. Many tenants pay into this at large sums, sort of like a down payment. Like, again, we can go on and on, but it's two completely different models. But in their eyes, they ignore all that part. And they say, well, here in New York, if we can just acquire the housing, then we can quote-unquote socialize it, which is a cute way of avoiding the word public housing, because they know that's not really a good image here in America. But that is their model. That is what they're trying to achieve, and they've been trying to achieve this for many, many years. Mayor Mamdani is quoted on this, Cea Weaver is quoted on this many, many times, and many other socialists will still to this day say we need to try and achieve the Vienna social housing model.
Wow.
That's
all stuff.
Even though it has nothing to do with New York, it's not New York.
I mean, again, you know, you talk about the history of Vienna. I mean, you're going back to feudalism. You can't even compare.
Yeah,
it's just we're in a completely different world.
A lot of what.
Hold on, and they're not, and all this stuff that we just read. The fact that Derek just read all this, that they're purposely devaluing people's assets and turning tenants to do things that aren't right, like calling in fake violations and not paying rent and going on strikes.
Withholding, yeah.
None of this is illegal. Like to force values down and use your power to do that, devalue assets. It's like it's like insider trading almost, like devaluing, making up lies about a company, trying to get people to sell it and then buy it for cheap. Like, it's insane.
I think many people would agree with you, but we all know that's for a court to decide, right? So
where's the courts? Like, what are we doing about that?
Well, the courts. There are cases moving through right now. IFJ has launched a major lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of New York's rent control system.
Yeah.
I mean, but we know these things take years, right? We can't just sit on our hands and say, well, I'll wait for the courts to decide here. And just, go into this playbook that we read, right? I think it's important for people to understand the DSA has been a fixture in New York politics for quite some time now, but they were, up until just a few years ago, I mean, they were very much just allowed people on the edges. Mm-hmm. Again, when I came in 2020, that was the largest class of socialists coming into office, right? It wasn't just Zoran, it was Zoran and I think about 6 other socialist lawmakers that came in at that time. And it's been obviously a meteoric rise from just 6 years ago that now their number one socialist is the mayor of New York City. Now they boast, close to 10 socialists in office in the state legislature. They have several in city council. They have many that are more aligned with their policies right now, right? So playbooks like these were sort of disregarded because they just didn't have a whole lot of power.
Yeah.
Now they do.
Yeah.
So now let's, the hope is people also in power now pay attention. Like, this playbook is being carried out in front of our eyes.
Yeah.
This is no longer a wish list. This is we're reading this in real time.
And you can, there's like 7 or 8 points on this playlist, but you can basically check off every single one of these. They are doing it or trying to do it, and you can see it.
I mean, the scariest part was getting someone to look at a building and say, "Oh, this is millions of dollars worth of work," and they're going to say, "Okay, we'll do the work. You have to do the work." And then what? The rents are going to say the same?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, both the city and the Attorney General now put in objections to this Pinnacle Summit transaction.
Well, one was shut down. Wasn't the mayor shut down?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, the judge ruled against their motion to delay the bankruptcy.
Yep.
And I'm not quite so sure. I'm not sure, what the Attorney General getting involved here is going to actually do. I fully anticipate the sale to still go through. But sometimes, you make headlines.
Yeah, waste some tax dollars.
The Attorney General wrote in their filing, whatever it's called, that the city should be given an opportunity to come up with a partner who will be a better steward of these properties.
They had the opportunity.
But also, it's important to know for your listeners if they haven't heard this, right? Like, one of the most glaring pieces for me was a few days into the mayor's administration, his corporation counsel puts in the court document and says, these buildings are unsustainable because they have, quote, very low averaging rents, and we don't believe pretty much any buyer will be able to have a profitable business or a sustainable business at that. And that's why we're objecting.
That was insane to me.
So you're literally admitting and saying the quiet part out loud, because of rent stabilization, because of the high expenses and low rents, these buildings cannot function.
So that was crazy. When that came out, I couldn't believe that whoever's suing on our benefit, like, that's not used, and a judge looks at them and be like, what is going on here? Like, how can I understand New York City, right? But how can someone outside New York City not see what's going on here and put an end to this? It's just insane to me.
Well, like I said, I think as someone who's been, in this world and put in specific into politics of it for several years now, it's reached national proportions, right? That wasn't the case before, right? You never had the Wall Street Journal writing a national piece on this or an opinion piece. You never had national news networks covering this issue of such a localized rent control system here in New York. So, I hear what you're saying, but we're also still just 2 weeks into this administration. I have no doubt that from that court document to a host of other evidence that has come along is now going to be used either, again, in future lawsuits, is being looked at by national figures. I mean, everyone's eyes are on the same.
Has there been thought to, obviously, Donald Trump is the president, obviously he has a real estate background. Has there been thoughts in trying to involve people that are close to him, like Richard Lafrac, who, owns, all this housing in Queens and all this RS stuff in Park Slope in Brooklyn? He's a good friend of his. How is he not involved, pushing this?
Like I said,
someone that can actually
Trump used to own these buildings down in South Brooklyn.
I don't understand how this is, with Trump in office, how this is happening. How is Richard Lafrac cool with this?
I don't know if I know the answer, but I think it's more like city-state laws than federal.
I know, but can't he have a judge that look at this that's competent?
Well, the federal government always supersedes any law state or city, right? I mean,
Federal government, yeah.
the federal
He's
government
the federal
supersedes our government, and that stands for regulations, that stands for local policy. So there's a host of options when it comes to this stuff. Like I said, we're 2 weeks into this admin. Obviously, this issue didn't start 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But there's a whole bunch of layers into this. There's politics. You've got midterm elections coming up. All this stuff is calculated. Unfortunately, good policy isn't just decided in a vacuum on whether or not it's good policy. You have to take into account all the other external factors.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to me.
So obviously the Pinnacle bankruptcy made a lot of news, but I saw Jay Martin posted on X this week saying, I think he basically said a third of the rent stabilized housing stock is functionally bankrupt.
Yep. I mean, and that's not him coming to that conclusion. This is think tanks like NYU Furman, right? This is also us deducing this based on the city's corp council saying this building can't function. So by definition, there's 300,000 other rent stabilized apartments that are either in the same, if not worse shape than Pinnacle's portfolio, right? So there's documentation of these buildings not functioning, right? To your earlier point, people saying, "Oh, open your books." These books are open, right? We know these owners file TC-201s. We know the RGB pulls out this data. This data is available.
Why are these buildings all bankrupt? Is it collections? Is it debt? Is it expenses?
Everything.
Yeah.
All the above. I mean, obviously, the core piece of it is the 2019 rent laws, which just ripped apart the devaluation and the model in which these buildings function. Mm-hmm. But even post COVID, right? Because this was sort of this perfect storm, right? No one knew COVID would happen. So this law comes in 2019, then comes COVID, and I think we all agree completely reshaped people's psyche. But beyond that, even just how housing operates. And what I mean by that, right? I'll give you a quick story. Like when I was a lawmaker, in 2020, we were trying to figure out what we're going to do. People aren't working. We got to pay rent. We passed ERAP, right? ERAP was $3.5 billion. What
is ERAP?
ERAP, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program that was helping to pay for rent for tons of people. We were paying $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 at a time. And I still stand by it as good policy. We can talk about, its inflationary impact and all that, but it was good policy. $3.5 billion. We only got that money because Chuck Schumer was majority leader. Federal government was printing money for us, so we put that out. I'm a lawmaker. I'm handling these cases in the district office almost every day with my team. What I was starting to see just a year later was those same people were coming back and basically saying, I can't pay rent, let's do the ERAP program. We failed as a government in educating folks and saying this was a one-time program. And so you've changed people's psychology and basically not needing to pay rent because the government was there, right? There's certainly been a huge need, and people that needed it got it. But you had people that just knew there was a backstop from the government that lowered collections across the board for nonprofits and private landlords. Then you layer in the backlog of housing court, where it's about 2 years right now to handle an arrears case. I mean, people have said this, and it's partly true. You're almost a fool today if you pay rent in New York City.
Yeah.
Right? Most people know you can probably go 2 years without paying rent without ever seeing any repercussions. So you layer that in. You layer that with the 2019 rent laws. You layer in the hyperinflationary environment post-COVID. I mean, it was a perfect storm. And now you have the new mayor threatening 4 years of rent freezes, where the RGB is basically the only avenue to account for increased expenses. We have a real recipe for disaster right now.
I never felt like the rent increases really made or were like make or break. I mean, maybe during Bloomberg when it was like 8% or 12%, on renewals.
They weren't. I mean, RGB adjustments were almost secondary in most operators' strategy pre-2019, but when they changed, not just vacancy, when MCIs were changed, when IAIs were changed, it became one of the few avenues to account for these expenses. So now it became critically important, because where else can you cover those increases? But you're right, RGB really wasn't the major concern, because you had different avenues to balance this out. And this is also why, right, Zoran will always talk about and say, well, de Blasio froze rent before, so we have precedents for this. Yeah, the difference is under the de Blasio era, those freezes were during a time where the RGB wasn't the only avenue to adjust for expenses. You still had different options.
Does Zoran or any of these council people or government people, do they have any thoughts or opinions on the amount of vacancy apartments and any ideas on what to do there? I mean, you guys have had countless videos on condition and the cost to get them back online.
Like I said, privately, many more are now acknowledging, many more are trying to understand how we can fix this. I will tell you, and then I think you would agree, if you don't work in this industry, or if you don't operate housing, the idea of vacancy reset saving this industry just doesn't click immediately, right? It doesn't make immediate sense to the average person, myself included. I didn't really comprehend why this was so critically important. And so that's what makes it difficult to sort of push as a policy when you tell folks you have all these empty apartments, this housing is falling apart, we need vacancy reset. And it's not a 1-2 connection. The next piece that honestly is makes it difficult is that people are still buying these buildings. Right? We know these buildings are devalued, we know they're in trouble, but there are still buyers out there. And we know there are buyers because people at this point are probably buying land that just so happens to have a building on it. I mean, the dirt is unfortunately probably worth more at this point. But because of that, it makes the argument harder to the political class because they're just seeing, well, they're not physically seeing buildings being condemned, right? They're not actually seeing the physical manifestation of this policy showing up as boarded up buildings, as buildings being abandoned, as complete disrepair, and I fear and I hope we don't have to get to that point, but without that, they don't grasp the severity. You know, you mentioned before we got on the pod about these offering memorandums that are going around and what we're seeing price per unit, but we know those aren't very public, right? You don't go on Zillow and see a building selling for $2 million that was worth $10 million 5 years ago, and that's again another component of why this is not in their face. Anytime I see any brokerage firm putting out a memorandum, I put it out there. I'll put it on my story or I'll put it on X so that people can see, like, these numbers are real.
I mean, the banks are done. Like, even on the Sentinel deal, not Sentinel, what was Pinnacle. The bank took a huge loss. That's insane.
Massive.
These people, like, they're pretty decent at underwriting. Like, they're not going to, they leave themselves a lot of wiggle room.
But even
for them to eat.
But even the banks, right? I've had these discussions and I'm like, you guys know for a fact your books are underwater. You know for a fact that
definitely.
But they won't say anything, right? And they're regulated by SEC, and they don't want to scare off investors. So it sometimes feels as if like I'm this one crazy guy screaming into the void. Like this is, the sky is falling, but you have all these other parties. Again, owners are, they don't want to go out in public because fear of retribution.
Yep.
Banks don't want to go out there in public because fear of their regulators or their investors. So you don't have enough players in this industry that are willing to be public about this and talk about it in an objective fashion. And that's why you have us here.
I think
So
Mamdani.
true.
I also don't think they care. Like going back to tenants, like they don't care. Like they see a building that sells for less than what bought like 5 years before, like earlier. Like they don't care. There's still like this rich landlord bought this building for X amount of money.
Correct.
It's still a rich person. We hate rich people.
I think Mamdani is all about affordability, and I feel like he acknowledges that a lot of affordability is on the supply side of bringing more units on. So I really hope that we can get the message across that these, tens of thousands of warehoused units, if there's a way to improve them and rent them out at rents that make sense, I think that's something that would be so huge for the industry.
There's no question it is the fastest injection of supply you can get.
Yeah.
I don't care. I mean,
100%.
City of Yes by Mayor Adams was exceptional policy. Haven't touched the zoning code since 1961, but that's going to take years, right? Office to resi conversions is great policy. Still going to take years to develop, right? I mean, I think we put out on a good year in New York City 30,000 units on a really good year. 50,000 could arguably come online in less than 6 months. I mean,
Definitely.
That is Co-op City. The Co-op City is 50,000. I believe it's 50,000 apartments, 50,000 people. But either way, just think about at a scale when you can bring that online, what that would do to free market rents, what that would do to so many families living in shelter right now, shopping with the city FEPs or Section 8 vouchers that need housing. But they're caught up in this fight of housing debate and how much a person should make as opposed to getting people in much needed housing.
Not only will it inject that many housing, it also inject money into these existing buildings, the structures, the boilers, the
Give them more
windows.
cash flow.
Yeah, the guy's like, oh my
To
God,
make the
my building's not worth zero anymore.
Right.
Let me take care of it.
And by the way,
I'll get a door on it.
By the way, all of that,
I love it.
all of that with no cost to the state, no cost to the
Yeah.
city,
Yeah.
no cost to the in-place tenants today. I mean, it's actually one of the most rare win-win-win-win policies that I've ever seen.
It's insane. I didn't even think it. Well, they're not going to allow that, right? Cea Weaver's not going to be like, oh, sure, landlords.
That's what I don't understand, because Mondami ran on 200,000. He wants to bring 200,000 units
and we have
online,
25%
right?
already right now.
Exactly. So, like, I don't understand. It's like a
And no one really knows.
finger.
I've heard 60,000, 50,000. Does
No
anyone
one
know
really
the
knows the
number?
real number.
It's a very tough number to pin down
Yeah,
exactly because
yeah.
it's constantly in flux, but we're confident in saying at a very minimum it's 50,000. And that's based on some DHCR reports. That's based on some internal sort of like polling that we do amongst our members, and we can just project that out just based on the size of our membership. But at a minimum, it's 50,000.
So what's the plan here? It's basically just blank vacancy reset. So basically, someone could go in, they could spend 10,000 or 100,000, bring the unit online, rent it out, and that's the new rent stabilized rent. Is that the plan?
Well, plan, wish list, how do you want to frame this?
That'd be amazing.
Right?
I mean, that's
I mean,
it.
That's just not, unfortunately, how policy works. Yeah, I guess if you're saying...
Because the IAIs don't work. You can't get there.
No, I mean, what we tell folks is that we are the only unique rent control system in the country. Even California, a bastion of tenant protections, and have their own rent control for a number of years. They allow a turnover unit to come on the market at market rate and stay regulated, right? Just what people have to understand is that you have to regulate the tenancy, not the apartment.
Same with Jersey City, by the way.
Yeah, it's like
Works
just
great.
Bring the unit once someone leaves, let them handle the renovations, let them reset it, and then that person can stay there for decades. They can enjoy the protections of any big price
100%.
jumps. But that, it's just not understood. But to answer your question, yes, vacancy reset remains the solution to saving this housing.
The current IAIs, I think it's like 12 to 14 years just to get a repayment on your money, and you're capped at like some silly low number.
30,000, 50,000 in
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
small cases.
But it takes 12 years just to recoup your investment.
That's
Like,
never gonna work.
And then reset.
It's so you're so far in the
But
hole.
I'm sure that the legislators here are going to want it tied to some monetary amount, and I'm sure they're going to object to the 140th, right?
Yeah, but it checks all their boxes of bringing housing on market. It
And
brings
the
down all
cost
the
to
rents.
renovate these units are so expensive now anyway.
Does anyone even know that? Because that's even as someone that's in the business, getting quotes to renovate apartments now it's six figures.
Yeah.
If you're doing a Band-Aid job, it's probably $100,000.
Definitely.
To gut a unit
The
right now is like
floors.
to soup to nuts gut a unit is 150, 175 a unit.
NYCHA
It's
is,
hard-
NYCHA is projecting to probably go upwards of $1.2 million per unit in Chelsea houses under their PAC renovation, right?
That's
and
crazy
then when
now.
we say,
Well, someone's gonna pocket that money.
and then when we say 50,000 is not enough, we're accused of fraud. And I'm just pointing out, I'm like, look at the delta here.
Yeah.
I mean, 50,000 or 1.2. We're not asking for a 1.2 million IAI, but there is real money that it costs to renovate in New York City. And as I said earlier, you've had such a changeover of elected officials in the city where they're mostly renters, right? You have to think about their own life experiences. People legislate based on life experiences and their constituency. If you have actually not engaged in a renovation project, you've actually not spent the money, gone to Home Depot, talked to a GC, and understands what it takes to renovate an apartment, it doesn't click sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I have had lawmakers actually say, right, like, well, they don't actually need new cabinets, right? All you have to do is put a coat of paint on here.
Well, to bring up sub rehab really, really briefly, like they do have access to this because they have a ton of files, and you have to send everything to DHCR for sub rehabs. They see every bill, they see every canceled check.
They know
They
everything.
know exactly what it costs.
They're choosing not to.
Yeah.
But the data is there. Like if someone hits on that, like the sub rehab files will tell you exactly what it costs to renovate a building.
Yeah.
Soup to nuts, you know every cent.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I think we can wrap up in a minute, but just unless you guys have another question, I have like one last question. All these free market apartments, right? Does the New York Apartment Association have any oversight or interest in the free market aspect of the market, or is it really mostly the Rent Stabilized Association, Community Housing Improvement Program? I know those are all targeted
I
towards
mean,
rent stabilized.
I try to position us as, sort of like a think tank, but really just an organization for good housing policy, right? And that can't end at rent stabilization because, it's 40% of the market, but you still have a huge amount of free market units. So to answer your question, yes, right? Like we were supporters of the ballot questions that were on the ballot last year to help improve housing. We were supporters of City of Yes that, a lot of it dealt with sort of zoning that really was outside of our concern, if you will. But I think it's important for the public and for lawmakers to understand that we stand not just for the interests of rent-stabilized owners, but for better housing policy in New York overall for tenants and for owners alike. So yeah, we do involve ourselves from time to time in some of these housing debates, just on free market, just on single family, all the way up to multifamily. But our membership is mostly in the rent-stabilized space. Obviously, you have some members that have mixed regulated buildings, so there's an interest in the free market units as well. But we focus specifically on rent stabilization, and even more specifically, pre-1974 rent stabilization.
Very good. I mean,
The free market renters have gotten squeezed so badly since the 2019
Oh my God.
laws. And I feel like it's so unfair what's happened to the free market segment
If
of the
Mayor
market.
Mamdani
So
is
unfair.
successful
Yeah.
in freezing the rent 4 times, he will be the greatest mayor for free market landlords probably in the history of New York
100%.
City. And that's what has to be understood.
Yeah, maybe
I've
that's a
said-
good way to frame it
That's
too.
a-
That's a really
that's
good way
what
to
it is.
frame
If you
it.
But they don't
free-
understand
if
that.
you
These
free-
people
I mean,
voted for him
this-
on affordability.
I said this the other day. I mean, we've passed all these laws. Since 2019, there's been a host of laws on top of that, local and state alike. What are the metrics here? We have a 1.4% vacancy rate.
Yeah.
Rents have gone through the roof on the free market. disrepairs are going up,
The
violations are
reholding supply.
going up. Like, what are the metrics here? You're telling us these are successful policies that help tenants, and yet tenants are only increasingly disgruntled.
Yeah.
I have a good friend who lives in a rent-stabilized building in Flatbush, and he's so upset at the property condition, and it just, the landlord, there's no incentive for him to do anything, and these buildings are falling apart. And landlords don't have the money to put money into them, and they're not going to. They'll deal with the violations, they'll get the liens, the emergency repair bills. They'll give the buildings back because there's no, it's throwing good money after bad.
Yes.
And maybe that's the goal.
But does all right? That's a real example right there. Does he understand the reason or no? Is he
Probably
totally
not? No.
He's completely
The
disconnected.
tenant does not understand the reason.
So that's the point. That's the disconnect. Like there has to be some sort of connection.
But again, like I said, even when you get people to connect it, whether it's tenants, whether it's lawmakers, whether it's other nonprofit organizations, or even staffers, the next step is still overcoming the fear that they have. They don't have the political courage to stand up and say, this is a problem, this is how you fix it, because they'll receive the blowback that I did when I was a lawmaker, right? And just the human psyche, people don't want to sort of stand out amongst the crowd. Yeah. So until we get that title change of understanding better housing policy is available, but you have to have the courage to sort of speak against some of this stuff.
Well, that's what's got to happen. I mean, people are at their breaking point, so something's got to change.
So. The rubber's meeting the road. I mean,
Something-
in many ways, I think, I think the DSA and Mayor Mamdani and Cea Weaver, I think they're very much like the dog that caught the car. I don't think
like
they had
that.
any plan to become, the mayor of New York City within 4 years of election. So now you're here.
Yep.
Now you're in the game. Now you run the city of New York. And one thing New Yorkers do, they look to the mayor to be the answer to everything, even if it's not the mayor's responsibility, like the MTA, right?
Yeah.
And so you can do one thing on the campaign, but now that you're the boss, you got to explain why these buildings are crumbling. You got to explain why the violations are going. You got to explain why rents continue to skyrocket despite you in office.
Definitely.
And the answer can't continually be because there's just a bunch of bad landlords, right? Because if you look to other cities, Austin, Texas, the rents are going down, right? We're seeing parts of Florida rents are going
Correct.
down. So is it just less greed in those states? Just can't be the answer.
Supply.
See, the rents are getting so out of control.
All right. Well,
crazy.
it's been a while. This has been really great. Is there anything else you'd like to go over?
We can talk here for 3 hours, but I think
I know you got it
Just to
right.
end though,
Yeah.
do you have just one thing real quick? What is a goal of yours? Do you have something that you think you can get past, or a goal in the next year and a half?
For fear of having this podcast come back to haunt me, I will just simply say we will continue striving to educate the public and lawmakers. And unfortunately, wins are incremental. I just have to be real there, and I'm real with my members, and I'm real to the public. Home runs very rarely happen, especially given the position that we're in. But I'm confident, given the data, I'm confident the team that we have and folks like you and people talking about this, that we can turn the tide on this because, again, we know the data and the facts are on our side.
No, I'll just say I'm really impressed sitting here
thank
talking
you.
to you. I feel like you have a really thorough understanding on what's going on, and that's great to see. And we checked a lot of boxes, a lot of angles here. And
People are lucky to have you doing this because obviously a lot of people are being very, very quiet.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
yeah, 100%. You're putting yourself in like the
in
line
harm's
of-
way.
Yeah.
Like
line of
literally, it's
war
a thankless
here.
job. It's
Some of these landlords should give you a building.
yeah.
I don't know if I want one.
Can't give
True.
them away.
Hey,
I don't know about
No, thank you, and thank you for the work that you do. I mean, listen,
Yeah.
it's all of us in this space, and you guys obviously take your time not just to do this podcast. I mean, this is not your core job here, right?
Yeah.
But like getting this word out is important. Educating folks in your industry on what we're doing, on just what's happening politically, is all helpful because this is how these things spread, right? We all have our own networks, and I understand there's things that I work on that people aren't aware of, and as much as I can get that word out and just educate them as to what the landscape looks like, it's deeply helpful to our fight.
All right,
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much,
thank
Kenny.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
Appreciate
it's been
it.
a pleasure.